Hello and welcome to week one of Introduction to Sociology. I am super excited for this class. I hope you all feel the same. Most people, when they sign up for a sociology class, probably have no idea what it is we're studying. I'm not going to lie, I had a degree in sociology before the sociological perspective really set in. But for me, it was my senior year of school. I was finishing up my psychology degree. I just accidentally happened to double major in sociology. So I was knocking out that double major, and I was also finishing my history minor. And while I was in my history classes, somehow I ended up with the sociological perspective. I was studying Latin American history, and I started realizing that the American history, American Revolution, and also the Latin American Wars of Revolution, they were really just class warfare. I didn't think about it until like it started to settle in that the American Revolution and the Latin American revolutions was really just the middle class, the European descendants that were born in America overthrowing the upper class, their European born overlords. Okay, so when you think about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all of them, really they were just the middle class, and they kind of got sick of having to pay tithes to the upper class. So they started a revolution and they overthrew the European powers in both North and South America. But then right after the revolution, what happened? You know, males that were of European descent took over the society. They took over the elite upper class positions, but then what did they do but deny rights to women and all minorities? Okay, so following the American Revolution, the middle class, had overthrown the European overlords. They became the upper class, but to maintain that upper class status, they denied access to women and minorities. Okay, so in this class, how are we going to be looking at the sociological imagination and developing a sociological perspective is imperative because, again, in that same Latin American history class, I read the word mestizo for the first time. And I was like, what is a mestizo? And then I looked it up in a book and it meant European mixed with Native American. And I was like, well, I have Native American, of course. I live in America. Who doesn't have some Native American in their blood, right? So am I actually white or am I mestizo? And for the first time, I started questioning my race. And then I started questioning race altogether. And then I started realizing that, white is just an ethnicity. It's not even actually a race. It's people from all over the world. You have people from Russia and Australia and England and, the America. And somehow we all ended up white, even though Russians are an Asian, you know? And then, the more you start studying race and you start asking, where does race come from? What's the origin of race? You're like, oh, so you mean 300 years ago, there was no such thing as race, but the Europeans wanted to divide society into those who could have and those who couldn't. So they came up with races, European, which became white, and non-European, which became non-white, then African American, and Hispanic, and Latino, and Asian, and but the whole goal of race, the whole reason race was created in the first place, is not because there's a biological difference between people of different races. Race was created so that one group, Europeans, could dominate the upper class positions of society and then subjugate everybody else into the lower classes. So when you start to study race and you find out that there's no biological difference between, when it comes to like the race categories we have now, they don't actually accurately describe biological differences between people because not all black people have the same common genes and not all white people have the same common genes. If you are white, you have less in common with your white next door neighbor than you do with someone in Africa. And if you don't believe me, look it up. Look up how genetics works and look up the idea that anyone that is white, which isn't even a race, it's an ethnicity, has more in common with someone in Africa than they do another white person close by them. And it's because you need more genetic diversity within groups than you do between groups. So there hasn't been that much of a need to evolve beyond a white person and African, but that white person needs to definitely evolve differently than that other white person. And again, I'm not a brilliant geneticist or anything, but that is absolutely fascinating stuff when you start studying it, okay? So again, we are in sociology. We are studying society. We are studying groups of people with something in common, okay? To understand how groups of people work, we're going to apply several variables, pretty much the chapters in your book. Okay, we're going to look at culture, a common way of life. Okay, we're going to look at how we're socialized into that culture of ideologies and beliefs and attitudes and material goods, for example. Okay, then we're going to start looking at social stratification, the ways that we divide into groups by sex, by race, by sexual orientation, and by social class, meaning, where are you located in the social class system compared to other people? And where you're located is based upon your education, plus your job prestige, plus your wealth, plus your overall power. Okay? Then we're going to look at the major institutions of society that structure our lives, like the education system, and media, and government, and politics, and the economy, okay? And the family. Okay, so these variables will help us understand the behavior of groups of people, the way society, groups of people function, conflict between these groups, how people interact to create society. Okay, we're also going to be looking at the three basic sociological theories and then applying these throughout the class. So we have functionalism. This is a theory of how society works that says that society is structured by institutions like the education system and government and politics, media and family, etc. And these institutions, including beyond those like race, gender roles, things like that, all structure our lives, okay? Social norms, what's an expected behavior, what's appropriate, what's not. All of these rules, the laws, the institutions, they all structure our life, they structure our behavior. Okay, so that's functionalism. And the best way to think about it is maybe think about the body. The heart serves a purpose, okay? Just like the education system. The lungs serve a purpose, just like the economy. Okay, and so just like the body, this society is structured by organs or institutions that structure the lives of all individuals. Okay, there's also conflict theory, and this is going to be looking at how groups in society are at conflict with each other. For example, historically, men have had power over women for thousands and thousands of years. And so a functionalist perspective might say something like men and women have divided into distinct social roles that are different, like women are homemakers and and men become breadwinners because that served a purpose for whatever. And conflict theory is going to say, okay, albeit it might have served a purpose back in the day, even though women, even back in the day, were perfectly fine, even when pregnant, of taking care of themselves without a man, conflict theory is going to say something like, well, gender roles were created so that man can dominate women, so that males can have a superior position and they can subjugate women. This enables men to have more power over their lives than women do over theirs. Okay? And so a symbolic interactionist perspective is looking at society and saying, okay, we're the ones who made this society. If you don't like it, if you don't like that we socialize women to cook and clean, and that we socialize men to go out and become breadwinners and never be with your family, because those are the traditional values, right? If you don't like that, change society. And that's what you guys are seeing going on before your eyes. Women, for 10,000 years, and then three waves of the feminist movement, have finally got some power over their lives where they can go beyond the house and start entering society because now they can vote, they can participate, they can get jobs. But even though women have more equity compared, with men in modern times, women are still paid 80 cents less, only 80 cents to a dollar. And then when you take an association race and sex and how much money you make, Hispanic women only make 60 cents to a man's dollar. A black woman only makes 67 cents to a man's dollar. A white woman makes 80 cents, and an Asian woman makes 86 cents because an Asian woman tends to have a higher education level than a white woman. So again, we're taking all of these variables like sex and race and social class and putting them all together to make sense of how things work. And then we're also going to be talking about prejudice and discrimination and oppression, systems of privilege, power, and oppression, basic intersectional theory, okay? But again, we need to be applying the theories throughout this class. So again, let's apply the theories real quick to race so you can get a feel for it. Functionalist perspective, what's the purpose of making racial categories? Well, this enabled Europeans to divide society into rich and poor. Europeans get to have upper class positions. Non-Europeans get subjugated into the lower class positions. By creating racial categories, that enabled Europeans to dominate, have a very clear cut distinction of who's supposed to be in the upper class and who's supposed to be in the lower class. Conflict theorist is going to come along and say they created racial categories so that one person could dominate another group, and that's not fair. Therefore, we should deconstruct these racist attitudes and create a more equitable society, okay? Because the idea that a white person has more power over their lives than a black person, is that fair? Is that a society that you want? Because that's how society historically was. If you were a female or you were non-white, you were stuck in the lower classes with no way out. And the law supported that, the culture supported that, segregation, you know, restrooms that were divided, not allowing someone to sit at a lunch counter. I mean, 50 years ago, the world was a very different place. So we've seen incredible social change. But that's symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionists would say, look, yeah, historically, they created a society that was racist. They divided society into only white people can be in the upper classes. And then they, made it so anyone who wasn't white was stuck in the lower classes. Are you happy with that? If you're not, change it. And so that's what we've done. We had movement after movement, culminating with the civil rights movements. In modern times, that movement is still needed, culminating in the Black Lives Matter, for example, because there's still prejudice and discrimination against non-whites. Okay? So conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, functionalism can all be applied in these very diverse ways. But again, they're very useful for understanding concepts like race and sex and gender and sexuality. Okay? For example, why is it that identifying as homosexual was considered a psychological disorder until 1973? And again, because of the culture we live in, had these social norms that if someone violated these social norms, then we check them, for example. And so our negative attitudes toward people that are not white, not male, not heterosexual, okay? That's the stuff we're tearing apart in this class. We need to look at society but the big disclaimer for this class is a lot of it's not always pretty. Again, when you start talking about racism, sexism, heterosexism, when you start talking about deviance and social control, race, ethnicity, when you start looking at the history of the United States with how the Native Americans were treated and how the Asians were treated with the Chinese Exclusion Act, okay? And how, anyone from Africa was treated with slavery and indentured servitude, and how poor people have been treated and how women have been treated. And then when you start to look at, some of the sad facts of life, child abuse and sexual violence. And, so not all of society is beautiful. A lot of it is very dark and very sad. But again, that's why we study everything that has to do with people in sociology so that we can hopefully advocate and construct a better world, a world that isn't racist and isn't sexist, and we can protect people from violence and harm. So again, this is just a quick introduction to this class, but as you guys read through the chapters in your book, this is what we're going to be talking about. Culture, way we're socialized into culture, forms of stratification, how these institutions structure our lives, but not just, physical institutions, ideological institutions, non-material value systems and beliefs and attitudes, okay? So we're going to be talking about all of that. All right, so for this week, week 1, you guys will first click on lesson 1 reading, and then you're going to work through everything, okay? So this tells you what you guys need to read from the book, okay? Then here's a nice, concise discussion of some of the stuff that we've already talked about. And then Durkheim on suicide, and that's basic functionalism. Durkheim's the main proponent for that, okay? And then you guys watch this video on roots of a discipline, just talking about the origin of sociology. And then this is going to be your first discussion response, okay? All your discussion responses You will post an initial discussion by clicking here on reply to this initial box. Your first post will answer the prompt in 300 to 400 words, okay? So you will do that here. Once someone has replied, also put some stuff in here, you guys will then come in and you will reply to 2 other students in approximately 100 words, okay? So for example, if you wanted to reply to the first discussion with your initial response, you guys would put that in here, and then you would hit post reply, okay? If I wanted to reply to somebody else, I would reply to this box here, which would then connect the feeds, okay? So you can see that these are connected because this is me responding to this post up here. And if somebody else does a new reply, such as this is a brand new post, for example, you'll see a gap right here. Okay, so your initial post, you need to reply to this box. When you reply to 2 other students, you need to reply to these boxes down here where it says reply, okay? So that's going to be discussion response 1. Here's a little bit about social theory, which we're just talking about with functionalism, conflict, and symbolic interaction. And again, here's your response 2 that's due for this week. So same thing, reply to the initial post in 300 to 400 words, then reply to 2 other students right here in approximately 100 words, okay? And I'm really picky about that. So do a good job of responding, pay attention to the word count. The better you respond to other people just really helps furthers the discussions. And I swear, the discussions that come out of this class are incredible. So I hope you enjoy them as much as I do, okay? So again, this week, you guys will have watched this video, of course. You'll have read the requirements for the reading. You'll have watched history and theory, roots of a discipline, and social theory. Then you'll do the 2 discussion responses, response 1 and response 2, okay? Again, remember your textbook is here, your syllabus is here, and then here are your due dates. It's just something I whipped up for you real quick, so you have a nice, clear, concise as to what's due. But again, to know what's due, it's always here, right underneath what's actually due also. But the due dates is just a convenient, the entire semester put on one page for you. Okay, super exciting. If there's anything you all need, please email and have a wonderful day. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.